The silence in my house had become deafening. After the divorce, every creak of wood beams and every tick of clocks echoed through vast expanses of emptiness. At 35, I found myself alone, tracing fingers absently across cold sheets in a bed that felt too big for just me. My chestnut hair fell in waves past my shoulders as I stared at my reflection each morning, noticing the subtle changes time was etching into my features. A few silver strands here, faint lines there. Despite maintaining my figure through religiously dedicated yoga sessions and morning runs, I felt the hollowness creeping in. My body was still curved in all the right places. My 5 feet 7 inches frame toned from exercise, but something vital was missing. The house, a modest 3-bedroom I'd kept in the divorce settlement, felt like a museum of memories I couldn't bring myself to pack away. That's when I saw the flyer for the local shelter. Give a forever home, find forever love. It proclaimed in cheerful font that seemed to mock my solitude. Something pulled me there that Saturday morning in October. The autumn air crisp as fallen leaves crunched beneath my boots. The shelter smelled of disinfectant and wet dog, a cacophony of barks echoing off concrete walls. That's when I saw him, a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to pierce straight through my carefully constructed walls. His coat was black and tan, slightly matted but still gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He sat with a quiet dignity that stood out among the chaos. "That's Bruno," the shelter worker Annabelle told me about him. 3 years old, he was surrendered by a breeder who fell on hard times. "He's incredibly smart, but he needs someone special." As if understanding he was being discussed, Bruno's ears perked forward, his gaze never leaving mine. When I approached his kennel, he didn't bark or jump like the others. He simply stood, tail swaying gently, and pressed his nose to the chain-link fence. Something in that moment clicked into place, a missing puzzle piece I hadn't known I was searching for. The adoption paperwork felt momentous, like signing for a new life. Annabelle helped me gather supplies, a plush bed, premium food, toys, and a sturdy collar. "He's been waiting for someone like you," she said with a knowing smile. "Some dogs just know their person when they see them." In the soft glow of Bruno's first morning with me, I could hear his rhythmic breathing beside my bed, which became my favorite alarm clock. Our bond deepened through each passing season. Spring flowers turned to summer storms, then autumn leaves. My initial loneliness transformed into comfortable contentment with his companionship. Those sacred morning walks got longer, more intimate. I discovered a hidden trail leading to a secluded pond where Bruno could swim freely while I confided my deepest secrets. His powerful body cutting through the water, muscles rippling beneath that glossy coat. I found myself admiring his strength, his unwavering devotion. "You're my guardian angel," I'd whisper as he shook water from his fur, those intelligent amber eyes locked on mine. He'd press his warm body against my legs, tail wagging slowly as if to say, "I'll never leave you." The dating attempts grew less frequent. Every man sensed Bruno's intense protectiveness. Mark from yoga class barely made it through dinner before Bruno's low growls drove him away. Jonathan, a charming lawyer, lasted 3 dates until that fateful night. We were on my bed, his hands wandering beneath my blouse, when Bruno's barking erupted like thunder. The scratching at my bedroom door grew frantic, his deep growls mixing with desperate whines. Jonathan froze. "He sounds serious," Jonathan stammered, already reaching for his discarded shirt. "He's just protective," I tried explaining, but Bruno's barking reached a fever pitch. The door rattled in its frame from his determination to reach me. "Look, I should probably go. Call me," Jonathan hurried down the stairs, Bruno's warnings following him out. Once alone, I opened the door to find Bruno trembling with protective energy. He rushed to cover my face in concerned licks, whimpering as he checked me over. His body pressed close, claiming me, those amber eyes fierce with possessive love. "It's okay, boy, I'm safe," I soothed, burying my face in his thick fur. "You're the only one I need." That night marked a shift. Bruno's bed moved from the floor to right beside mine. His warm presence kept the loneliness at bay better than any man could. I started declining dates altogether, preferring our private walks and intimate evenings alone. Our morning trail grew more isolated as Bruno guided me deeper into the woods, his muscular form leading the way, pausing to make sure I followed. Those amber eyes seemed to hold secrets, drawing me further from the world and deeper into our private paradise. Our isolated morning walks became an obsession. Each dawn found us wandering deeper into the woods, Bruno's powerful body forging ahead while I followed trustingly. His black and tan coat glistened with dew as he marked our private territory. That fateful morning started like any other. The mist hung low between the trees as we explored a new trail. Bruno's ears suddenly pricked forward, a low rumble building in his chest. Before I could react, a large Rottweiler burst from the bushes, unleashed and aggressive. Time slowed as the dogs clashed in a fury of snarls and snapping teeth. Bruno's muscles bunched and flexed as he positioned himself between me and the attacker. The sound of their fight echoed through the trees, primal, violent, terrifying. I screamed for help, but we were too far from the main path. The Rottweiler's teeth found Bruno's shoulder, drawing blood that matted his beautiful fur. But my brave protector fought back fiercely, his powerful jaws and trained instincts prevailing until the other dog finally retreated with a yelp. "Oh God, Bruno!" I cried, dropping to my knees beside him. He was panting heavily, blood trickling from the puncture wounds, but his first concern was still me. Those amber eyes searched my face as his tongue gently licked my tears away. We hurried home, where I tenderly cleaned his wounds in the shower, my hands trembling as I parted his wet fur. Bruno stood patiently, pressing against my body whenever I started crying again. His warm strength remained undiminished despite the injury. That night, I couldn't bear him sleeping separately. "Come here, boy," I whispered, patting the bed beside me. He leapt up gracefully, his large frame settling against mine as I stroked his fur. The steady thump of his tail against the mattress soothed my lingering fears. "You saved me," I murmured into his neck, breathing in his musky scent. "My brave, beautiful boy." His response was a soft whine as he nuzzled closer, one paw draped possessively across my waist. The intimacy of the moment made me shiver. I'll never forget the night everything changed between Bruno and me. His wounds from protecting me were healing, but seeing those small scars beneath his thick fur made my heart ache. Each gentle whimper as I tended his stitches tore at my soul. My brave, beautiful boy had risked everything for me. That evening I couldn't sleep. The moonlight filtered through my curtains, casting shadows across Bruno's powerful form beside my bed. His amber eyes studied me with that soul-piercing gaze that made me feel completely seen. My fingers trembled as I traced the healing marks on his shoulder. "You've given me everything," I whispered into the darkness. "Let me show you how much I love you." My heart pounding, I crept downstairs to the kitchen. The smooth peanut butter glass jar felt cool in my shaking hands. Returning to our darkened sanctuary, Bruno's tail thumped softly against the sheets as I settled beside him. His warmth radiated against my skin. That first taste from my fingers made him whimper softly. Such gentle sounds from my fierce protector sent shivers through me. As my confidence grew, I spread more where I yearned for his attention. His warm tongue was so tender, drawing soft gasps from my lips as pleasure built in waves. When release finally crashed over me, it was transcendent. Stars bursting behind my closed eyes. Afterward, Bruno curled protectively around my trembling form. Our hearts beat in perfect sync as I buried my face in his thick fur. No more loneliness, no more emptiness. Just this primal connection that filled every void in my soul. "My beautiful boy," I murmured. "My everything." Our bond deepened beyond ordinary understanding. Each day brought new intimacies, new discoveries. His devotion consumed me until nothing else mattered. Not society's rules or others' judgment. Just us in our private world of touch and trust. I wasn't looking to date again, but Eric was different. A rugged veterinarian with kind eyes who actually understood animals. To my shock, Bruno didn't growl or bark when they met. He approached slowly, sniffing Eric's outstretched hand while I held my breath. "He's magnificent," Eric said, expertly examining Bruno's coat. "Such loyalty in his eyes. You can tell he adores you." Those words made me nervous. Could Eric sense the depth of our connection? Yet Bruno seemed to accept him, allowing him to join our evening walks. We fell into an odd routine. Movie nights with Bruno at our feet. Weekend hikes where Eric taught us about local wildlife. But in private, guilt gnawed at me. My intimate moments with Bruno became less frequent but more intense. Stolen afternoons while Eric worked. I'd cry into Bruno's fur afterward, confused by my conflicting desires. My loyal companion would comfort me with gentle nuzzles, his amber eyes full of understanding. "I'll never leave you," I'd whisper. "No matter what happens with Eric, you're my first love." A year ago, I never imagined allowing another human into our private sanctuary. But Eric was different. I met him at my friend Natalie's backyard barbecue, where he was treating her elderly retriever's arthritis. His gentle hands and quiet confidence with animals drew me in immediately. At first, I dodged his attempts to ask me out. The guilt of my secret intimacy with Bruno weighed heavily. But Eric was persistent in the kindest way, leaving his card in case Bruno ever needed a checkup and bringing specialty treats when we'd bump into him at the dog park. The day he first came to our house, I was a nervous wreck. Bruno had driven away every other man, yet something extraordinary happened. Instead of his usual aggressive display, Bruno approached Eric slowly, head slightly lowered, and sniffed his outstretched hand. "What a magnificent boy," Eric murmured, his experienced fingers finding just the right spots behind Bruno's ears. "You can see the loyalty in his eyes. The bond between you two is beautiful." Those words made my heart race with anxiety. Could he somehow sense the true nature of our connection? I wondered in fear. But Eric just smiled warmly, completely at ease with Bruno's protective nature. Gradually, Eric became a regular part of our lives. His veterinary knowledge helped me understand Bruno even better, explaining his body language and teaching me new training techniques. On our group hikes, he'd point out medicinal plants and tell stories about wildlife encounters from his practice. "You two saved each other," he observed one evening, as Bruno lay contentedly between us on the couch. "It's rare to see such perfect trust between human and animal." If only he knew the full truth of those words. While Eric brought normalcy and companionship to my life, my heart remained divided. Those stolen afternoon moments with Bruno became more precious, more desperate. The familiar jar in the kitchen called to me less frequently, but with greater intensity. After our private intimacies, I'd hold Bruno close, breathing in his musky scent while guilt and confusion warred inside me. His amber eyes never judged, only offered unconditional love and acceptance of my torn nature. Eric represented everything I should want: stability, understanding, a chance at a conventional future. He even talked about us moving in together and getting Bruno a companion dog. The thought terrified me. How could I maintain my deepest connection while sharing a home with someone else? Tonight, watching Eric sleep peacefully beside me while Bruno keeps his loyal vigil by the window, I realize I'm at a crossroads. Can I truly bridge these two worlds? Or must I choose between socially acceptable love and the primal bond that saved my soul? I wondered. On our last night alone together, before Eric was due to move in, tears streamed down my face as I held Bruno close. The familiar jar sat unopened on my bedside table, a symbol of what I had to leave behind. "You saved me," I whispered into his fur, breathing in his comforting scent one last time. "When I was broken and alone, you put me back together." Bruno sensed my emotional state, pressing his warm body against mine, as he always did when I cried. His amber eyes held such understanding, such acceptance of whatever I chose. One final time, I reached for the jar with trembling hands. Our intimate connection that night was bittersweet, knowing it would be our last. His gentle attention brought me to that familiar peak of pleasure, but this time my ecstasy was mixed with soft sobs. Afterward, Bruno curled protectively around me as always, his steady heartbeat soothing my aching soul. "I'll always love you differently," I murmured, "but we have to move forward." In the following weeks, I packed away certain items, hiding evidence of our special bond. The jar was buried deep in the trash, yet Bruno's devotion never wavered. He accepted Eric's increasing presence with grace, as if understanding this was best for me. Sometimes I still catch his knowing gaze in private moments, remembering what we shared, but we found a new normal now. My beautiful boy remains my protector and confidant, while Eric gives me the human love I need. That first night together as a proper household, I lay awake between them, Eric's arm draped over my waist while Bruno watched from his new bed across the room. Those amber eyes held such understanding, such acceptance of our evolution. Still, my body remembered his touch, his talented tongue that had brought such pleasure. I shivered at the memory. "Everything okay?" Eric mumbled sleepily, pulling me closer. "Just adjusting," I whispered back, watching Bruno's tail thump softly against his bed. The following weeks brought new routines. Morning walks became a trio instead of our private communion. Bruno adapted gracefully, though sometimes during quiet moments alone, he'd press against me with that old familiar intensity. My heart would race, my body responding to memories of our passionate past. During intimate moments with Eric, Bruno would retreat to the living room, a gentleman's courtesy that made my chest ache with gratitude and guilt. Yet sometimes I'd catch those knowing eyes and flush hot, remembering how thoroughly my beautiful boy had once claimed me. Jars of peanut butter now stayed firmly in the kitchen cabinet, used only for occasional sandwiches. But every time I opened it, my fingers would tremble slightly, remembering those wild nights of abandoned pleasure.